also recognise he's not just that fiddlesticks one trick anymore. He has a lot more up his sleeve, and he's a very, very good jungler. Had a little stint on Infused a while ago as well. And Nick in the top lane, he's someone new. Haven't seen him too much in the scene.
No, kind of a new face. So
Yeah.
I'm interested to see what he does end up, what kind of play style he has, what kind of champions we're going to see coming out of him. I'd love to see Gnar purely for the GN synergy coming out. But let's take a look at the bans that we already have coming through on the board. Pretty standard bans so far. You've got Elise, very powerful jungler right now. Lulu, just kind of a fallback champion for so many mid laners. And then Alistar, which in the LCS and the LCK is by far and away the most picked support right now.
Actually, I've just been corrected. I think on our team sheets previously, Dynasty was for some reason listed.
Yeah, I wasn't sure on that one, whether that was a smurf or I was just
I wasn't sure.
It.
I was just rolling with it as well. Actually, I don't believe it is Dynasty. For some reason, our team sheets haven't been updated properly, so no worries. It's actually a different player in that mid lane. So interesting to see what he brings as well. I think he's an EU player, so not actually from the UK, but obviously you are allowed.
Neither are we right now.
Exactly,
so.
Neither are we. So what can we say? But you are allowed EU players on your UK Premiership roster.
So long as you've got at least the 3 out of 5 UK players. Yeah. But let's take a look at the rest of the bans. Fiddlesticks going to be target banned here at Dandy Chap, so going to be denied that one trick. And we'll see. I mean, you already mentioned how he's no longer really just a Fiddlesticks one trick. Let's see how true that is. But again, Nidalee and Gangplank, very meta bans coming out here. Very kind of standard stuff other than that Fiddlesticks.
Yeah, so Fiddlesticks at Dandy Chap. Fiddlesticks has become slightly more viable with Runic Echoes.
Yep.
Just because...
I mean, we talked about that last week.
Yeah, I mean, Fiddlesticks really struggles with the old jungle item, which was the Rune Glaive, because it relied on auto attacks, and that's just not part of Fiddlesticks' kit. You know, Fiddlesticks really auto attacks when he has the red buff, and that's really about it, obviously, for the extra damage. But yeah, Runic Echoes has made Fiddlesticks far more viable once more. Gangplank, very standard ban that we've seen throughout the Premiership. Again, we've talked about that King and Queen of top lane. Yeah, and with Fiora. It's going to be Nidalee. It was probably the most played jungler during our qualification tournament. She had a lot of success, especially from the top tier teams. They used her to just completely shut down and dominate the games.
Yep.
And Alistar is something that Raisins has played to great success, as we talked about very recently.
Yeah.
It's going to be Corki locked in first here, though, and a Braum and Rek'Sai.
Look at that dynamic duo right now, locked in for TCA. They've got the Braum for... I nearly said for Fearless there. He's obviously going to be going over to Raisins. And then you got Caesar on that Rek'Sai. Now, we've seen him play Rek'Sai so many times in the promotions tournament, and he did it to great effect. This is kind of, from what we've seen, his go-to champion. Yeah,
and actually, most recently, the last game that we saw played of the ESL Premiership was Caesar on that Rek'Sai.
Yeah.
Absolutely dominated the mid lane, allowed Hatung to get super far ahead on that Ahri versus the Lux. And honestly, he has a great synergy playing that champion with his mid laner. But he's a really great Rek'Sai player, and in fact, I think from all of the PJ Caesar games I've seen, the most games I've seen him play have been on Rek'Sai.
Yeah,
so a champion he's very, very comfortable with.
Yeah, absolutely. And then over on the other side, we've got our next two lock-ins. So it looks like the Corki will be going over to the mid lane as the Lucian has been locked in for Jokerism. Definitely a champion that we know Jokerism is very comfortable on. And then as well, we're going to see that Gragas jungle, which is kind of snuck back into the meta and now seems to be, again, one of those sort of top 3, top 4 picks. Yeah,
Gragas has had some changes, notably charge time on his Drunken Rage and, you know, increased barrel. Basically, when you throw your barrel out, you get the full 2 second slow again. You don't need to charge it up to get the increased duration of the slow. It's made his ganks slightly better, and actually his clear speed has gone up quite significantly through some of the changes. So actually, Gragas has snuck back in there as a very viable jungler. We're going to see Hatung on that Ahri. It's something we have seen previously. He has been an absolute monster on that. We're going to see Nick having picked up the Corki, which can go mid or bot, and obviously Lucian locked in as well. So it's likely going to be Corki mid, Lucian bot.
Yeah. And as well, we're going to see a Caitlyn coming out here for Giblet, which isn't something I don't believe we saw a single Caitlyn during the promotions tournament. Maybe one.
Maybe one, yes.
But anyway, Caitlyn kind of a champion that specifically fits into some compositions, not something that we see every game, but when it's used effectively, it can just take over the late game.
Yes, completely agree. The funny thing about Caitlyn is a lot of people will pick it into Lucian because it's one of the only champions that can generally survive against Lucian's lane bully presence just because of her range. And actually, if you play Caitlyn to her best ability, can sometimes even win trades just previous, before Lucian even has the chance to get involved and fight. It's going to be
headshots OP, dude.
Yeah, Malphite and Morgana locked in here, so Morgana support and Malphite will be going to Nick in that top lane.
Look at the all-in that Choke have right now. If you get caught by a binding, you are dead, and they will follow up. They will go for that full-on team fight following that. Pretty different kind of team coming out from TCA so far. I'm really intrigued by this Ahri pick and how that's going to go into the mid game. We've seen Haytoon play these assassins. I want to see, because there's kind of two ways of playing Ahri. You can play more of that kind of mage style, or you can play more like the assassin style. Haytoon, from what we've seen, is definitely an assassin style player.
Yeah, and pre-6 he's going to struggle versus the Corki in the mid lane. So most people struggle versus Corki in the mid lane. Just without that extra mobility of Spirit Rush, it's going to be harder and harder to dodge the phosphorus bombs. And Corki's pretty good at getting away from those charms. Oh, that is an interesting lock-in. It's something that we've seen pop up very recently. Nautilus top to go.
Played quite a bit in the LCK recently.
Yes, it has. Nautilus is particularly potent with the ZZ Rot, but obviously I think ZZ Rot is still disabled right now, so we may not see it. I'll have to double check. I knew it was disabled a few hours ago. I'm unsure if it has become available once more. But Nautilus top is started to creep back in. He does well with Grasp of the Undying.
Which, honestly, you wouldn't really expect Nautilus to be creeping anywhere, never mind back into the meta, being a giant metal man. But yeah, as you say, definitely a very strong champion, very much kind of a similar role to Malphite as well.
Yeah, people value the hard engage that Nautilus provides, and actually can lock up singular champions quite effectively, which can always be really good against double AD compositions as well, because you always have someone to focus down a specific target. And actually will do all right versus Malphite in lane, because it actually potentially even forces Malphite to go for some magic resist early on, because people kind of forget Nautilus does a fair amount of magic damage with that Riptide, Titan's Wrath, and all those kind of extra abilities that he has in his kit.
Especially when you build full AP.
Yeah, but I believe we have a short video to have a quick look at within a few seconds, just from the Choke lineup. They met up with our producers and they had a little video session. I believe it was Jokerism and the manager, Gankicus.
We've had a lot of roster changes this season. I think I'm the only original player from the previous Choke lineup. So we've got a lot of good new players coming in, and I think that definitely gives us a good shot at coming top 3 and maybe even winning it.
It is a new lineup, so it is pretty much like the new team. Like we aren't going to be the old Choke, but we're hoping to grow on and do better than the old Choke.
This season compared to last season, there's been a lot of different changes in the meta. People have to adapt their champion pools to fit the current meta. People are going to have to put a lot of practice in to adapt to the meta.
So the UK ESL Premiership has had a very positive effect on the UK scene. Before we had not as many big leagues, just kind of off-land tournaments, and there wasn't any kind of Premiership or consistent league system. And what this has done is it's made teams stay together because they're staying in the league format.
The new Challenger Series qualification spot, I think it's really driving us and motivating us to reach this amazing end goal. It's really pushing us forward.
Getting the Challenger Series spot for the ESL UK Prem is huge. We can get the players, it makes them more motivated. It motivates us as a UK organisation because we can aspire to a higher level.
I think the biggest contenders are Renegades and Manalite for sure, closely followed by Exertus Esports. They've got a lot of good EU Challenger players, so I think they'll be the ones to beat.
Banditos, who have got Impaler, who's played in the North American and European LCS at a high level, and also Exertus, who have just picked up a really strong roster.
Premiership has had a really big impact on my life. It's allowed me to compete and promote myself as a player and interact and learn from all these great players. I think it's a really good way to get your name out there and show what you can do.
So there we have it, Jokerism and Gankicus feeling good coming into this season of the Premiership, and singing the Premiership's praises, apparently.
He looked like he meant business right there at the end. He's about to throw down some serious League of Legends on the Rift. But speaking of which, we're very close to going live here on our first game on the Rift. Spectator delay almost over, and we are excited here at ESL Cologne. We're looking forward to this game because this is the first game of our Premiership season. It begins a long road for the teams working towards that Challenger Series qualification spot, the grand prize at the end of this, not to mention a fantastic prize pool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you guys missed it before the season started, it was announced that whoever wins the finals will be entered into a Challenger wildcard tournament. So this tournament is now officially a way into professional play. This is these teams' kind of pathway to turning that hobby into a career. So everything is on the line, and these are going to be the games that really kind of set the tone, set the pace for these teams.
Exactly. Every team's going to want to come in strong this week. And
Got to get that momentum going.
Exactly. And, it's a moderately short season. It's 8 weeks, I believe.
7 weeks, yeah.
Yeah. So, you've got a lot to prove in a small amount of time, and the best teams will rise to the top here. Obviously, we have our finals as well, which will be a huge, huge event. And I'm sure the team that wins this will be over the moon because, like they said in the video right there, it's about UK teams aspiring to greater heights. Gangak has put it really well. And, I think every UK team has that aspiration to break through the barrier and make it towards a global stage. And honestly, I hope that whichever team moves forward, they do well because it's a huge opportunity for them. And I know we have so many talented players.
And this is one of the things. The level of talent for this season has stepped up unbelievably.
Yeah.
We can see now kind of last season it was sort of even going in from week one, you kind of had your top four and you had your bottom four, and you kind of knew that those top four were going to the finals. This season, no such luck. I honestly couldn't call right now confidently which 4 teams are going to be at the finals. It is going to be so close between some of the top ones. There's definitely kind of 6 teams, I would say, that are definite contenders for it. But enough about that right now because we are on to Summoner's Rift for our first game of the day. It's going to be TCA up against Choke Gaming. And let's see the new versus old battle begin.
Yeah, and look, it is a very standard split for these guys. They're going straight for the defensive lineups. Seen that very similar kind of start from all of our qualification games as well. We saw very few invades looking for deep warding. A lot of lane swaps ended up kind of out of the blue, and then you usually had the red side coming out on top because they'd go for the jungle invade afterwards. It's quite a regular tactic. You have your support move in, try to harass, and then you have your top laner and jungler run through and look for an invade on the blue side jungle of the blue side team.
Yeah.
But it's very standard for these guys. Looks like everything is just even, and they're going to stay in their regular lane setup. So actually, Caitlyn and Braum are heading back. Are they going to do the
old lane swapperoonie?
The minion block take? I'm not totally sure if we had that locked off. We'd have to talk to our admins about that because that looks like the tactic is potentially employed.
It looks like
if both teams are doing it.
So I guess fair play.
Fair play, I suppose. I think it's fair play for both teams. They are going to block the minions, which obviously, I guess whichever team does it better will have the slight advantage. Yeah. But again, what this does is basically it allows the wave to push towards you slightly, giving you a little bit of an advantage as you come from doing the Grump or the Krugs.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I want to talk about before the game fully kicks off here is kind of a little bit of a trade going on in the mid lane. Nothing too major though, but this is kind of Choke definitely with some sort of an advantage coming in here because they've been able to kind of build up here. They've been able to watch TCA in the promotions tournament. They already know what kind of style these guys are going to be playing.
Yeah, and Fearless. I'm interested to see Fearless on this Nautilus because a lot of the times we saw him, he was playing that Malphite, and he played it quite well during the qualification series. So him going up against it is going to be an interesting prospect. And I'm kind of interested also to see how he functions because Gragas does actually do pretty well against the engage from Nautilus, especially if you manage to position that explosive cask well. And a level 2 hit by Fearless here, huge amounts of damage coming out from that Riptide. That is the scary part of the Nautilus kit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, oh, look at that. Such a short cooldown on the Riptide as well. Nick actually starting to get chunked down by this one. He's not actually going to have his Dredge line available, though. So Nick going to be able to walk away from that one.
Yeah, he's not level 3 yet, so won't have his entire kit. And Titan's Wrath is actually a fairly, I guess, unnoticed amount of damage, especially if you let the auto attacks run through, because it does apply that AoE dot. Usually the old Nautilus, when he first came out, was a jungler. You used to max that Titan's Wrath first because you could just clear camps by auto attacking each one and applying that dot to most of the mobs. Dandy Chap just going to take that Rift Scuttler away, give some vision to both his mid and bot.
Yep.
Haintung, again, he's not having a hard time in a lot of respects against Energy right now. He's having a pretty decent start time. And again, post 6, he should, with a bit of help from PJ Cesar, potentially be able to get some ganks off. But PJ Cesar says, nope, 6 isn't too late. I want to go right now.
He certainly does. He's heading into lane. Energy ice cold. He's going to have to Valkyrie off towards the river. The rest of the team is coming on up. Wiz going to get ready to land the binding, but doesn't look like that one's going to happen just yet. TCA with some nice communication, calling out that the bot lane has left, and they're going to be able to react. Yeah,
and actually it looks like blue buff is going to be stolen away. I think this will be a 3 buff for Dandy Chap if they do take this.
Yep.
Jokerism is going to take it off the board, which will allow him to harass fairly open-endedly in lane as that Lucian. Sometimes you can be constrained by your mana. Raisins, oh no.
I don't think they should have walked towards that one. Dandy Chap going to be looking for the knock-up. He manages to land it onto Raisins. The bind goes onto Giblet. They need to pick a target right now. And in fact, TCA just walk away. A little bit of kind of disjointed gank coming out there from Choke.
Yeah, and actually the most important part was just Raisin's got a really fantastic Unbreakable up there. Managed to shield most of the damage, which meant that they originally were focusing Caitlyn. They hadn't put enough pressure onto Raisins, so he was able to soak up the damage and walk away scot-free. No Summoner's Burnt. And yeah, good for TCA here. That was a good avoidance of what could have been a pretty bad situation in the early portions.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick going to be able to just kind of farm it up underneath the tower. Fearless doing a good job so far. He's managed to accrue himself a 6 CS lead here. And kind of bullying Nick out a little bit. Nick not doing too great on HP. And actually, Nick has sort of pushed the wave a little bit here. Fearless pretending to base is now going to be able to kind of reap the benefits of that.
I love the mind games that can take place in these lanes, especially in that top lane where wave management becomes so important. You can just pretend that you've gone back to base. They're going to want to push it out potentially to force you to lose minions, especially if you're not going to use teleport. And no, they just push it and you're still in that brush as PCH Cesar.
Here we go. Nick in a whole lot of trouble. The Flash is not going to be able to dodge a knock-up. That's the dredge line, and this is going to be first blood. PJ Cesar picks that one up.
And that's what I really like from PJ Cesar on his Rek'Sai. He's always using those fairly unique gank paths that you can take as a Rek'Sai player. You can obviously burrow through those walls, through areas that other junglers may not be able to gank from, and sometimes you aren't expecting it, especially that top lane gank. It's a pretty bread and butter maneuver as Haintung.
Haintung with a nice flash over the minion wave. That's going to get him away from Dandy Chap and get him to safety. So Dandy Chap kind of trying to react to the pressure that Cesar is putting onto the map, but not quite going to be as successful. And
we're going to see the Balmy Cinder from both Malphite and Fearless here, which I think is a good choice. It's a fairly standard start for those tanky top lanes. And Haintung with the solo kill, but gets returned by that tower. I'm guessing that was just a level 6 all-in right there.
Yeah, I unfortunately missed that one, but I would assume that was kind of just a Spirit Rush in, go for the kill. Oh wait, I'm underneath the tower.
That is what you can do. Obviously, that's what I was talking about. Ahri can level 6 all in the Corki fairly effectively, especially if you can try and charm either the Valkyrie or get around that Valkyrie.
I mean, you mentioned that, but the Ahri's charm is potentially going to be changed. There's currently on PBE, the charm will no longer interrupt
dashes. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. I think that's part of if I'm going to give a personal opinion on that matter, I do think that it's part of the skill of Ahri, especially if you can time it properly. But we'll see. Hopefully there'll be some feedback on the PBA. They are not certain changes. But enough of that. As we move forward to the game, PJ says it again, aggressive in this blue side jungle, and Nick going to come up and take the grump for himself here.
He's just like, cheers for smiting, dude. I'll finish that one off. Says that is going to get that kind of Thorns buff from the grump, so that will help him with jungle clear in general, but I'm assuming he would have wanted to grab that one for himself. Is going to get the consolation prize of the Scuttle Crab.
Well, he could have gone straight for Nick in that top lane again to a similar jungle path. So actually, Nick kind of got himself out of 2 sticky situations in the sense that he actually managed to stop an invade on that blue side for that blue buff, and also managed to keep himself in a fairly safe position, because obviously that could have been an area where that could have been an area where PJ Cesar attempted to gank Nick again, given the fact that he'd already lost that flash.
Yeah. Well, we'll see where he decides to put the rest of this pressure. So far, 3 kills on the board. Caesar did manage to force that first blood up in the top lane. We'll see whether he chooses to continue that pressure, because there's starting to be a bit of a CS lead building up in that top lane as well, as Wiz arrives back down in this bottom lane. Across the board, we're fairly even, except the top lane and jungle, where we're starting to see a bit of a gold gap accrue here. You can see
almost
already.
Yeah, that's quite a big goal gap as well between the Rek'Sai and Gragas. Dandychap having difficulty applying pressure, especially after that, I kind of guess, failed bot lane gank. He's going up against pretty highly mobile lanes, except for that bot lane, so you'd think that maybe focusing the bot lane would be best for him, but he's having difficulty because they're getting pushed up so hard, and that's generally what a Morgana Lucian will do, because the Tormented Soil and also the Lucian's abilities, generally push pretty hard. And PJ says it goes for the top lane again.
He does indeed. Nick will have that unstoppable force available, but he's going to get locked on down. But looks like they decide they can't really go for too much here. And Nick going to be able to stroll on away to his tower. I don't think they're really tanky enough to go for a dive at this early stage.
No, and actually you're seeing a defensive build. You're going to go for the Cinder Hulk from Caesar here. So, relying on the Caitlyn and the Ahri for the majority of their damage. In the early game, actually, Fearless will be a moderate threat, especially if he finishes up that Sunfire Cape sooner rather than later. He'll be doing a deceptive amount of damage in the early to mid portions of the game. So they'll probably have enough damage to tide them over, and they'll really be looking to make it so that Caitlyn becomes the main damage source the later the game goes. Hainton will be able to obviously execute people, he'll be able to assassinate when he can, but the later this goes, you'll be relying on Giblet more and more on that Caitlyn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, later on in the game, that's not really an issue for Caitlyn, because you definitely scale super hard, but kind of the issue that Caitlyn always has had, and I mean kind of needs to be a balanced champion, is during that mid game, it feels like your AD carry is pretty much non-existent. Yeah,
Caitlyn does sometimes struggle. I think she's moderately decent across all aspects of the game, but she really shines when she's got the highest amount of attack speed. She can proc those headshots over and over again, because the early game she's pretty strong. She's tided over by the fact she's a caster AD carry in some senses, and it's really her range at the end of the day that makes her so powerful in the late game. She can avoid a lot of gap closes that a lot of other enemy champions may not be able to do so, especially with that 90 caliber net as well. So,
well, we have Dandychap down here in the bottom lane looking for this lane gank, and in the meantime PJ says they're going to be stealing away that Razor Beak. Ice Cold heading in towards that jungle. I think he's aware of what's going on here.
You look at the top lane, items are completely mirrored between the two guys. So Spectre's Cowl, and that makes sense, picking up the early Spectre's Cowl versus the Malphite and the Nautilus. As I say that,
yeah, we've got a bit of a skirmish going to be starting off, and immediately teleport's going to be channeled here. Raisins misses his ultimate though, and that should be TCA backing away, but Fearless has stepped into the fray. Dandychap gets knocked up as Fearless is chunked down by the culling. Raisins is going to be the first one to fall in this fight. And Nick charging forwards as Hatung enters the fight. He's going to use that Spirit Rush, and it's going to turn it into a 1-for-1. Charm misses as the flash comes out.
Yeah, and Corky could have had that the special package there. And actually, that would have been a complete game changer had he had that in the bank. But unfortunately, was not to be. Energy has yet to back after that Hex Drinker, and hasn't picked up that special package, which has become available very recently. But had he had it, that could have been incredible team fight for Choke down in that bot lane. But as it stands, a 1-for-1, both teleports used. A very tanky frontline in the form of Fearless there, managed to soak up a lot of damage as well. And I think the main part was just that Haintung was so quick to react to that bot lane gank, and had he not reacted as he did, it would have been a complete win for Choke, and TCA would have had to back off immediately.
I think this next couple of minutes or this next few minutes is going to be very, very important right now for TCA, because a whole lot of their gold is channeled onto PJ Caesar right now. The jungler has 2 of their 3 kills, and on the other side you can see both kills in the hands of the carries for Choke Gaming. So PJ Caesar, he's got to make that gold kind of known about, he's got to make that effective.
Yeah, he does. He's got 2 of the 3 kills, like you said. Interestingly enough, when you look at the Choke composition, it's sort of going to spike pretty heavily within the next 10 to 15 minutes. Once Corki finishes his Triforce and once Jokerism gets that Essence Reaver and maybe the Rapid Fire Cannon, you'll probably start to look for them. They'll probably maybe like focus on smaller skirmishes then, because this is where they're really going to shine. They do pretty well in the skirmishes, and they're pretty effective team fighters with that Malphite as well. The later it goes, they're really going to rely on the fact that it's a double AD composition here, and they'll be able to very effectively push down towers.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll see as Dandy Chap has been caught out here. Black Shield is going to block the charm, but is he going to be able to survive? Flashes away, and Wiz going to tank the ace and the whole culling. Does get a decent amount of damage onto Heitung, though. And in the end, they're going to back away. I say that, Energy Ice Cold charges on in.
Wow.
Flying on. But
that was risky, far too risky.
I don't really get why.
He could have. You saw the charm; it was millimeters away from hitting there, and had he been hit, that would have practically been a free dragon for the TCA.
But like, it's not like he kind of went for anything after going for that Valkyrie. Anyway, Ice Cold actually might have been caught out here. The Chilling Smite and the knock-up are going to land. Flashes away from the charm though, and should be able to get over to his tower. Yeah,
he does burn his flash, but probably not something that he was planning on doing there. Bot lane tower lost here, the first tower of the game, going over to choke. It's kind of what you were expecting in that bot lane because of how hard they have been pressuring that turret over and over again. It's in part been why Dandy Chap has found it difficult to gank that bot lane, because it is a Lucian Morgana lane. They are constantly pushing. Yeah. The reward for that, however, is they take that early turret.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious as well about this sort of Morgana pick. It's not something we touched on massively. Morgana used to be kind of a must pick every game, but we've not seen that recently. Do you think it's specific to the composition that's come into play here, or do you think that's more of a matter of it coming back into the meta?
It's difficult to say. I think the addition of things like Corki in that mid lane has just made... It used to be Ezreal, didn't it? You used to see the double AD in Ezreal.
Yeah.
But the fact that Corki's coming through, it's just... But when those sort of AD champions become meta in the mid lane, then you will start to see double AD compositions come through.
Absolutely. And we're going to see now Chiplet and PGA Cesar pushing down on this bottom lane tower. Looks like this might just be a tower trade, but actually Cesar's been caught up underneath the tower. Nick trying to do what he can. One auto will finish that one off, and now Raisins is there. In a 2 versus 3, essentially, Nick manages to grab himself a kill.
Wow, I mean, that was a huge surprise. I don't think Cesar really realized the amount of damage that Nick could put down with the Malphite. He obviously has got a little bit of armor.
I didn't realize.
Yeah, he's got a little bit of armor behind him now, and that will affect his ground slam because it does scale off armor, and you have to be a little bit more careful. And actually, the base damages on Malphite's ultimate are pretty strong, as well as the level of CC that it puts down, especially under tower, can be pretty scary. It was actually the Cinder Hulk that obviously procced the tower aggro for PJ Cesar in that bot lane, so kind of unintentional there. They were very, very committed to pushing down that bot lane tower. Heitung kind of in no man's land here.
Yeah, just taking a bit of a chunk there from Ice Cold, but he will be able to clear away this pink ward. He knows that his jungler is nearby, stealing away that red buff, so going to be able to be fairly confident in this one and just going to clear away that mid lane. Look at the sustain as well that you get when you're playing Ahri. Every few spells, you are going to be able to get that flat regeneration.
Yeah, and finally Fearless will be able to take this tower in the bot lane. I don't think Nick will have much to say about this, as actually no, unable to finish it off. It is it is Nautilus at the end of the day, not known for his tower pushing abilities. Cesar is again here waiting around. Don't think diving Nick is on the cards, but they just want to put the pressure onto the turret.
No, absolutely, and we'll see whether they're going to be able to. Fearless just clearing away these waves oh so quickly with that Riptide. I mean, you were talking about how much damage it does earlier, certainly proving that to be the case, and here they go. Going to be able to finish that tower off, and actually, Nick might be in a bit of a tricky situation. Wiz going to arrive on the scene, though, and get his top lane to safety.
Yeah, and now they TCA lineup, they're going to try and fight for some vision control around the dragon area, especially that'll be coming up moderately soon. I do like the deep vision wards coming out here from TCA in the red side jungle, as Choke, Wiz, maybe... No, he's not going to step into a trap here.
Ace and the Hawk goes out in the mid lane, and it's going to be Wiz caught up. Glacial Fissure isn't going to find anyone, though. Wiz having to burn his flash.
Yeah, the explosive cask there. Again, that's part of the reason that Gragas is so good against the composition they're facing. That when engages do come down, explosive cask is a really, really useful disengage tool. That's one of my favorite things about Braun, by the way, in the versus the Lucian, is that you can just use the Unbreakable to tank the culling, and actually you will take that reduced damage from it. So I really like that Braun into the Lucian pick. It's something that makes part of Lucian's kit, which can be very, very vital, kind of negated by that support pick there.
Yeah, just take a look at the minimap right now. Look at the vision control that TCA have managed to acquire of this sort of the bottom half of the blue jungle. Just complete vision dominance.
You're seeing a similar pattern, though, from Choke in the red side jungle of TCA, but I prefer it on the red side jungle of the blue side because you might be contesting that dragon fairly soon, so you will have a better idea if anyone is sort of overstepping or coming close that you can make a pick with, because with an Ahri, with a Nautilus, it's actually inherently built into your composition that you're going to want to make those kind of singular picks, because they do have the CC that can chain quite nicely in that respect. They do have the charm, they do have that dredge line. It's all these extra parts of the composition that make it so useful to make picks and so useful to have that kind of deep vision control. But as we talk about it, wards have just expired and control slowly being fed back to Choke on their own side jungle.
Yeah, absolutely. And likewise, on the other side of the map, that vision is going to expire, and we're going to see the top half of the red jungle back in control of TCA. So kind of the teams going back into their own halves, essentially, just settling for their own jungle. Let's take another look at the scoreboards here and just kind of take stock of our inventories. We do have very, very even CS scores across all of the lanes here. The only major difference really being that jungle Raisin actually gets caught up by Dark Binding. Is going to have to jump away. Caesar trying to do what he can to deter that damage away from his ally. Will be able to do so. Unless
TCA make a pick, I don't think they want to be fighting at this point in time. Corky's got his Triforce and a Hex Drinker. Lucian's got Lucidity Boots, his Essence Reaver, and already started to build up a bit of the crit from that Zeal. So you'll obviously have the extra cooldown reduction from that Essence Reaver also. This is kind of the time where you're expecting the choke composition to spike. So fighting would be really bad for TCA right now, especially as Caitlyn is not yet finished any of her core items. Infinity Edge not yet done, and neither has she finished the attack speed item, which is likely going to be either the static shiv or the rapid fire cannon. Actually wouldn't mind the static shiv here because it has been buffed, and also they could do with a little bit of extra wave clear, because against this composition that they're facing, which actually performs pretty well in a siege as well, you kind of need the extra wave clear, especially as you're maybe looking to turtle for the next 10 minutes. You need to ride this power spike out. There's no way you're going to win fights unless you make picks, which is something we talked about earlier, which is kind of the way the TCA composition is going to have to function.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious about the kind of build route that Giblet is going with this Caitlyn. You've got the BF and the pickaxe. Finish tier 2 boots and then into Zeal. It's very kind of it reminds me of the Tristana build that we saw, I think it was Season 4 Worlds, where you would go with a pickaxe, maybe a VF sword, and then into your static shift second. Yeah,
it's something that's actually come back into the meta for a few patches now. It's more efficient as an AD carry to finish 2 flat AD items, mainly due to the Infinity Edge nerfs that happened a fair while ago. It's just better now to pick up your critical strike from your attack speed item and then finish the Infinity Edge afterwards. Sometimes if you're really ahead, you can finish the Infinity Edge, but in an even game like this, it just makes more sense to finish. Aggressive by Haytun.
Yeah, Haytun goes in. Dandy Chap going to have to flash away, but he will go down. Ignite finishes that one off, and that is going to blow this middle tower wide open for TCA.
Yep, Fearless is pretty low on mana here. He's not going to be able to teleport in this situation, especially as Nick will be chasing him down. It's not actually going to happen. It's going to be the Dragon on the cards, the second of the game, and I think Choke will be desperate as the teleport comes through.
Yeah, the teleport will be coming through. Raisin's going to be able to tank up that culling with the Unbreakable, but the smite is going to be here for TCA. There's no smite available, but a 4-man unstoppable force. Giblet gets obliterated, and look at this cleanup. PJ says they're trying to escape in the meantime. Haytung on the other side. They'll both end up going down. Fearless, the last man standing in just a second. Nick going to finish that one off with the Sunfire game. Haytung surviving for quite a long time, but will finally go down, or will he? He dodges the Grand Slam, finally drops. Fearless has arrived, but it's too little too late.
Yeah, Fearless had no mana. He was too busy clearing waves in the top lane with his abilities. Couldn't teleport at the same time as Nick just because he didn't have that mana in his back pocket. And again, you said said it in the play-by-play right there. The main reason they lost, they took too much damage from the Dragon and got 4-man ulted by Malphite. And you then set it up perfectly for a huge phosphorus bomb from Corki. People sometimes don't respect the amount of AoE damage that Corki can do. And like I said, even in the Fearless.
Fearless is going in. He gets the depth charge onto 2. He's about to go down, and the rest of his team is finally arriving as he tries to flash away, but he fails it. Raisins and PJ Cesar, they found themselves in a 2v5, and it's not one they're going to win. It's a 2-0 for Choke. They get the Dragon, and 6 kills in total now.
TCA, what were you thinking? You know, you've got Fearless. Yes, he's pretty tanky, but he's not the impenetrable fortress that Nautilus can become in the later stages. You know, you have to respect the fact that you're going up against a mid-game spiking team. You don't want to fight them. Haintung had just died. Giblet was too far away. What were you thought you were going to 2 versus 5 them with a Rek'Sai that's built tank and a Nautilus? Just not going to happen. So yeah, I don't know. TCA making some very odd decisions, especially around that Dragon fight. They took too much damage, like I said, and then completely obliterated by this mid-game spiking composition coming out from Choke.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't feel like a kind of a well-thought-out team decision, It kind of feels like Fearless is like, we can do this, guys, let's go for it. And Cesar was like, okay, I'll come and help if I can, sort of thing, rather than a planned execution.
And Raisins was valiantly attempting to save his teammates with that Unbreakable, but unfortunately, a Braum, a tank Rek'Sai, and a Nautilus aren't going to be able to 3 versus 5 a very heavy damage team coming out from Choke, especially at this stage in the game.
No, and this has opened the map up so much for Choke. They got, as we said, they got the Dragon and they managed to get a whole bunch of kills for themselves. And just look who has those kills. 3-1-3 on both of the carries right now. 30 CS has been built up in favor of Choke in the mid lane. And then look at the top lane as well. 3-1-5 on the Malphite. Nick is going to get so terrifyingly tanky so fast at this stage. And against that Caitlyn that needs those items to scale up, it's going to be so hard to deal with that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like you said, what better targets to have your gold go onto than the mid laner, the bot laner, and the top laner. Yeah. It's absolutely ridiculous. And actually, Wiz is on one. We didn't actually mention this previously, but Wiz is on one of his best champions right now.
Yeah.
Wiz is on that Morgana. It's something that he has been known fairly, thoroughly for across a lot of UK tournaments. And Cesar now attempting to get that deep vision with the Rek'Sai. She is a very mobile champion, so can move across those walls. A little bit like the Nidalee, does allow you to be more free with your movement in the enemy jungle. It was something that we saw on the early game from PJ Cesar, but now he's struggling. You fully expect TCA to sort of retreat now. They try and give up as little as you can. You're really probably expecting to lose out for the majority of the next 10 minutes here. You're going to have to weather the storm if you're TCA.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick here trying to defend this top lane tower, and it looks like there's going to be reinforcements on both sides. Not a whole lot of HP remaining on that tower. And the Baron, let's remember, has now spawned. That could be something that comes into play for these teams. And, I mean, we've been saying how far ahead Choke are for the last couple of minutes, but realistically, it's only a 3,000 gold gap, so it's not the end of the world just yet.
Yeah, we've seen very few turret pushes coming out this game because they've seen more skirmishes around the Dragon. Dragon seems to have been the objective of choice for a lot of these team fights between the two teams. It's been a low turret game for this point in the game. It's 2 apiece, so that's why you're seeing moderately low gold values as Haintung tries to dodge out the culling here. He has got that empowered orb, so will very shortly, as Cesar comes through a broken turret, catches Dandychap in the jungle.
Does indeed. Dandychap should be just about okay, though.
He should be dandy.
I mean, he should be fine and dandy, yeah. He's going to be able to stroll away, getting pretty darn tanky. Already has that Dead Man's Plate as well as the Cinderhawk. And this is going to be a mid lane tower going down in favor of Choke Gaming. And take a look at this very early blue pot coming out here for Ice Cold.
Ice Cold, a very early blue pot indeed. He wants to get the obvious stats that it provides. And I guess when you're aiming to fight around this time in the game, blue pot can be a pretty huge item spike for you. It would have been better with a special package, because obviously it would be able to increase damage. As Fearless, he's getting caught up here.
He does, it's indeed. I don't think he's too worried. I mean, you could say he's fearless in that situation because he is just getting so tanky already. Has a Banner of Command as well as that Sunfire Cape. So Banner of Command going to be really good for building up that MR, which a lot of that range damage is going to be magic.
Yeah, exactly. And this is something I was going to point out. The 2 items you can see, mid laner and jungler, you've gone for the Locket of the Iron Solari and the Abyssal Scepter. They're very good items when you're going up against a pretty heavy magic damage team. All of Malphite's damage, apart from auto attacks, is magic, and obviously Gragas, mainly magic damage. Corki, probably 70% magic damage just based on the way his kit works. You're really only facing the Lucian who's going to provide that AD.
Yeah.
So, you know, good to itemize some early magic resist here. I wouldn't even be surprised to see Caitlyn go for a Hex Drinker into a Maw at some point. It's been something that we've seen more and more AD carries pick up because it provides a little bit more useful stats than it used to. The arm penetration, for one, can be quite useful. So, you know, I wouldn't be surprised to see that on a Giblet at some point on this Caitlyn.
Yeah, and another item that we've started to see some AD carries go for is that Sterex Gauge as well. It's kind of these items that were originally designed for bruisers, now starting to go.
It's just too powerful. The item itself is just far too powerful and far too gold efficient. It's really good to surprise, especially against assassins. Callista, who will likely be getting well into the midst of the fight, does really well with it. I think maybe Caitlyn could probably itemize things that are slightly more efficient for her. You know, because she has that range advantage and because she has general safety nets that she should survive without the Sterex Gauge here, especially as, you know, you have to be caught in that Malphite ultimate to really be receiving damage as Caitlyn here. As Haetung, I don't think he really respects the damage that Nick is putting out right now.
No, Nick is getting pretty scary, actually. He still has his ultimate. Haetung needs to be careful how much he wants to commit to this one. Might just be about to get knocked up, but Nick decides he doesn't want to go for that fight, and Haetung is chasing this one on through. Nick might, in fact, end up going down here. In the meantime, there's a tower dropped in that bottom lane. A nice little siege set up by Choke. And I mean, Nick, he didn't go down, so he kind of just did his job, and he picked up 2 objectives here for Choke.
Yeah, he committed really hard there, both Fearless and Haetung. Haetung even burning his flash. You got to remember that Malphite's pretty slippery rock. He can throw down that seismic shard and will just steal the movement speed. And if you aren't going to, you know, burst him, he should just be able to run away. And you saw it there. It's very hard to chase a Malphite, especially after Flash and all 3 Spirit Rushes had kept Haetung at least, you know, a good Orb of Deception's range away from him. It's difficult chase there. I don't think maybe the target they should be focusing.
No, absolutely not. And we'll see whether they can pick up the pace here a little bit. Let's take a look at the gold difference. 4,000 now in favor of Choke with that extra dragon under their belts as well. It's 2-1 in dragons, so I can't imagine that that's going to be an objective that really changes the game at this stage unless we go kind of to the hyper late game, but doesn't seem overly likely right now. We'll have to wait and see. But I mean, definitely still a game that is pretty difficult to call. It could go either way because I do feel like TCA do have a better late game.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I kind of, you know, based on the fact that, you know, you got a Caitlyn. Caitlyn does do well in the late game. You know, really a 6-item Caitlyn can be one of the best AD carries in the game. My issue is that you're actually struggling for damage in that late game as well. I mean, you do have Ahri, but she generally tends to be a more mid-game focused orientated mage. She's better at making picks in the late game than she is at being a flat-out huge threat. And if Caitlyn gets caught up, and there is a lot to catch the Caitlyn in the Choke composition, you're kind of removing the only threat you have to be worried about. So I guess in the late game, yes, 6-item Caitlyn, if she stays completely untouched, she should be fairly, you know, fairly good. But Raisins here.
Here we go. The fight is kicking off. Raisins tanks a whole lot of damage, but that's cooldowns on now. Wiz is going to tank up that Orb of Deception as we see Nick trying to get onto the carries, and he's doing a fantastic job. 2-man unstoppable force. Giblet's so close to going down, but they're all kiting away on barely any HP, and it looks like they're getting away with it. 1-for-1 trade there. In fact, 2-for-1 as the top laner drops as well, and this is going to be a mid lane tower for Choke.
Yeah, and this is exactly my point and case. There isn't much on the side of TCA to stop Caitlyn getting locked up by a Malphite ultimate. You don't have the, you know, the safety of a Morgana Black Shield, for instance. You don't really have the Janna for the peel. And after you've used that Braum ultimate, and that was kind of used to disengage from Raisins, Caitlyn is a sitting duck at this point. You know, Fearless had teleported to try and do his job to get onto the carries of Choke Gaming. So once you have the Nautilus out of the picture, Caitlyn is just a sitting duck here. As ice cold, he has to be very careful.
Does indeed. Nick is going to be there, though. And honestly, I mean, we were talking earlier about where the kills were spread across this team. The fact that Nick had so much gold is a major factor in why they won that fight. Nobody could deal with that giant rock just walking at them. Haetung and Giblet, both, like all of the damage basically from TCA was just having to kite back, trying its best to survive, and then the second they go in that choke point, he's able to get the double knock.
You finally have the Lord Dominic's regard on Giblet. Hopefully he'll have something to say. But
here we go.
my word.
Raisins just gets melted down. Cesar is going to be not long behind him. We're going to see Jokerism chasing that one out. He will go down. In the meantime, we see Fearless and Hatung trying to escape up this mid lane. Dandy Chap can't quite land that knock-up, but he does get the slow onto Hatung. And look at the burst coming out from Energy Ice Cold. That's going to be Fearless just trying to find a way out of this sticky situation. In the meantime, Giblet is going to be able to base down in the bottom side of the map. But Fearless, I don't think he's going to get away from this one, to be honest. Here we go. Wiz with a beautiful binding. The tower is going to drop, and that is going to mean he is all alone. A good dredge line, but it's nowhere near enough, and that's a kill over to Jokerism.
And this is the issue, because Choke got so fed from their mid-game spike and because TCA made some questionable decisions, if your front line is not lasting long enough for Caitlyn to do her job from the back line, you're just going to leave Caitlyn by herself facing 5 members who are all going to remain fairly healthy. And there's just nothing that TCA can do with their composition that will ever win out against Choke if it stays like this. You know, the TCA front line is getting absolutely melted by Choke. And that's an issue. That's a really big issue, because it means that Caitlyn is completely isolated. And you are, like we said, you are relying really on Caitlyn to provide that later game stage damage. Ari is great if she makes a pick, but in this kind of sort of multi-threat team fight, where even Malphite with that frozen gauntlet is a pretty decent threat, Ari is feeling kind of useless. You know, she has to get the right position. It's very difficult against a Gragas and a Malphite to get the positioning that you need to get to the back line. So I just don't see many ways for TCA to get an out here. They had to be looking for picks. Like I said, I think that's the way their composition was going to work. They had the Nautilus, they had the Ari. You make a pick on someone unsuspectingly walking through your jungle when you've got good vision control, then that's the way you win here. Baron being started, however. Yeah,
it is indeed, and they should be able to finish this one off. PJ Cesar is going to look for the Miracle Steal, but immediately they spot him out and the DPS stops. They're not going to allow this one to just be taken away for no good reason, and now they should be able to finish this one off. Dandy Chap going to be there to get the smite down, and that is going to be another objective into the hands of the Sharks, who are certainly starting to choke the life out of their opponents.
Oh, I've never heard that one before.
Well, it's usually used as a negative term, their name.
No, I think the one pun that I've heard with Choke Gaming is they're choking the life out of their opponents, because it's something that we've heard from them being fairly dominant in the past. But, you know, this is a really good start for Choke Gaming. You know, it's looking like they're going to go on to win this. They have a 10k gold advantage. This is bringing a new roster to the table, and it's a roster that is looking really strong. I've been thoroughly impressed with both Jokerism and Energy. So it goes to show you don't first pick Tristana, you win games.
Yeah, pretty much. And we'll see. I mean, so far, Choke definitely looking like a strong roster heading into the rest of the season as well. Let's just remember, this is their first game of the entire season, so there was kind of a lot to live up to here. Choke, as an organization within the UK, kind of have made a name for themselves over the years. And this is kind of the first iteration. Jokerism, the only player from the last lineup to be remaining. And so far, they're looking absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, the new Choke lineup does look really, really good, and I've been thoroughly impressed. And again, this is what I was talking about during the qualifications, these multi-threat compositions, especially compositions that aren't relying on a singular threat in the late game, tend to do fairly well. As you can see there, the culling already applying pressure to Giblet, and that's going to make him an easy target. Hatung rushes in here.
He does indeed. He's going to have to Spirit Rush straight on back out there as Fearless steps forward. That's going to be a 3-man knockup coming out from the Malphite. Raisins goes down, and they're looking for more. Giblet jumps to the back line, and Energy Ice Cold might gone too deep, but he manages to escape, and it's a 2-for-0 so far. Choke gonna push on forward though as Jokerism goes under the tower and he survives, taking out Hatung, and that is how you end a game. That is how you force a win. Choke Gaming with our first victory of the season.
Absolutely brilliant display from Choke here. I have been super impressed with the way they approached this game. I think that they got a slightly deep